Hello everyone. In my last recording, I did my best to explain the Grau meta and why it should have never been a meta based on numerous factors. It seems that people like the video, so I've decided to do another recording to explain yet another hot topic of Warzone, and that's the snipers. People will say something like HDR is better than AX50 or whatever, and that's just not true. Every gun in this game has a purpose. And some do it better than others. That's just how this all works. When Call of Duty created Warzone, they weren't really in a good position to do it. That's because all of their guns at the time were created for multiplayer, not Warzone. So there were certainly a lot of things that should have been changed between multiplayer and Warzone, but it didn't happen. So now we're stuck with this very weird round table of guns. But that's a discussion for another time. Let's go ahead and focus on the snipers. There's three that I think need to be discussed, and that's going to be the HDR, AX50, and the Dragunov. And we'll get into the Dragunov discussion in a bit, but let's go ahead and talk about the HDR. The HDR has better bullet velocity than the AX50 as well as range. So the HDR is going to be more friendly to people who aren't familiar with bullet drop or leading their target. The AX50 has a slower bullet velocity, so it's going to require more skill to use. However, the AX50 sort of makes up for it with more RPM than the HDR, but the difference is only 6. That's it, 6 RPM. With the HDR or AX50, your goal should be to hit the head. If you can hit the head, the HDR and AX50 will be a down if hitting the head. From what I've read, this applies at all ranges, and the car can do it as well. So there's technically 3 rifles that can do this. Hitting the head, though, is going to require a bit more skill than you're used to, though. So that's why I'm going to include the Dragunov discussion. Just like the AK, the Dragunov gets picked up and called trash. That's just because people don't understand how it works, or for that matter, they don't understand that it needs a specific build to make it easy to use. That's another fault of the devs, I think. They did not make these ground dropped weapons optimal for their particular category, or for that matter, easy on players. But anyways, the Dragunov, it's actually pretty easy to fix once you get the 660mm barrel, which you should have on the Dragunov in Warzone anyways, a compensator, and bipod. Once you have those 3 attachments, the Dragunov is super easy to use. But you'll notice that its recoil base is actually fairly annoying. It's not going to be the worst. You just need to understand that you have to reset your recoil between each shot. But once you start getting to the 660mm barrel, it becomes a little bit easier. As you can see here, the line becomes a little tighter. It's only going to get more tighter once you get the compensator and bipod. But yes, the Dragunov, once you learn to master it, you'll notice that it actually does 136 damage to the upper torso. For comparison's sake, I'll go and scroll down and show you the HDR. The upper torso for the HDR is 112 at its optimal range. That means that the Dragunov is doing more upper torso damage than the HDR or AX50. What that means to you as a Warzone player is that if you're not good at hitting the head, the Dragunov is going to be able to kill a lot quicker than the HDR or AX50 when hitting the body. So if you're not good at aim, you need the Dragunov if you're going to be doing snipers, because at the end of the day, it's just going to be 10 times more efficient when hitting the torso. So what it boils down to is the HDR and AX50 are great for extreme distances and headshots. The Dragunov is great for shorter distances, but more of a body-hitting weapon. That's it. They have their own purposes. There's no such thing as the HDR is better than the X50, or vice versa, or that matter, Dragunov versus the other two. They all have their purposes. With that out of the way, I can mention one alternative to this, and that's the EBR-14. The EBR-14 is going to require more shots to kill, but you'll notice it's a lot more forgiving than the Dragunov. It's going to hit for 60 damage at effective range anywhere in the torso. It does not have a headshot multiplier like the Dragunov, but the fact of the matter is it has 60 damage to the entire torso. If you'll notice, the Dragunov is only 70 damage on the lower torso, 136 upper. So it means no matter where you're hitting, it's going to be 60 damage guaranteed. So the EBR-14 is going to require more hits than the Dragunov to kill if you're going for the body, but it is a decent alternative to the Dragunov and certainly a better idea than the car. The reason for that is in its range. You'll notice that its base damage drop-off is going to be 65 meters. That's going to be a lot more than the car. That's going to be better than the FAL, the SKS. It just has a ridiculous range. Once you slap on a 22-inch barrel, notice that that damage drop-off line that you see right here, this little notch, is no longer visible because it's way the heck out there. So yeah, the EBR-14 is your next best bet after the Dragunov for a weapon that's using sniper ammo in Warzone. Earlier I did mention bullet velocity, so we're going to real quickly cover that. You'll notice that barrels do change the bullet velocity and how far the scope has to be pointed upwards for that shot to hit. I like the Dragunov's base scope because it does actually make things a bit easier to guess where the bullet drop is, but you'll notice that, as Ace pointed out in his video, that the bullet drop does change significantly with the barrel. You'll get a half reduction to how far the scope has to be pointed up to hit somebody in the head when you get to the 660mm barrel. You'll notice the same thing going on with the HDR and AX50. Here's the HDRs. You'll notice that the base HDR is basically right on top of the head, but once you get out to the longest barrel, the 26.9 inch, it becomes basically a hit scan. You just point it at the head and hit. That's how easy the HDR is in terms of being able to aim for the head. Now, whether or not you can hit the head is entirely dependent on your ability to lead the target and other things, but fact of the matter is, it's pretty easy. And here's the X50s for comparison. The SA Pro is actually its best barrel, and that's a little bit deceiving considering that there's a 32-inch barrel option, but actually it's the SA Pro. So you notice it has a 10% reduction to its bullet scope aiming once you reach the SA Pro. But even then, look how far up above the head it is at 100 meters. You basically have to put the very edge of this cross right on top of their head for that to hit. Whereas we don't really see that with the HDR. It's the very middle section of its scope is basically right on top of the head. The Dragunov's is, of course, going to be similar to the X50s in that it's kind of above the head, but it still has to be pointed up a lot further than the HDR. So there you have it. That is all the snipers of Warzone in a nutshell. Hopefully this helps you figure out which sniper to be using and things like that. I'll go ahead and link the Google document from last time so that you can access this a bit easier. Good luck with Warzone.